at the ABQ Sewing Studio. Well, actually, I'm in my home sewing studio today. And today I want to show you how to make a really lovely decorator pillow. And I've just called it the home pillow because it has a message of home on it with two cute little houses and the word home spelled out. I've made it in a solid cotton. And today I'm going to show you how to do various things to foundation or paper piece, to join sections of paper piecing together to make more of a scenic block, how to join your points when joining sections together, how to do some really cute decorative top stitching, the importance of padding your work so it has a very lush decorator look to it, how to do a cross back, and how to do a really attractive binding that brings the color to the edge of the piece to give it a real designer look. So join me today for this terrific video to see how it's done. So in your pattern, you will have received the templates for the paper piecing divided into the various sections. And there are 2, 6, 8, 9 sections. You'll want to get paper scissors and trim these out of the paper. Now, I have printed just on regular printing paper, but if you so desire, you could scan this pattern and print it out on foundation paper, which is more like an onion skin paper and quite easy to see through, so that can be helpful sometimes. But anyway, I'm going to use regular paper and I'm going to trim just outside the outer lines. Now you can see there's a dashed line here, and that is the edge of the actual piece you're going to be sewing. The heavy line are stitching lines, so you don't really need to cut on the dotted line, just somewhere in that vicinity. So I'll trim these out and get them ready to be used. I've trimmed all my little sections out, and you can see there's the HOME and the roof and so on. And each piece is labeled with a stitching order, that's the numerical order, but each section also has an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. So we want to start with A, and we want to use this particular piece to begin our foundation piecing with, so I'll put all the rest away. All of our little sections are helpfully printed in color as well, so you'll know exactly which color to place under each section. So let us find our blue and our kind of buff color and get started with that. The first thing I want to do is start with a number 1 piece, and that's the piece that's going to fit here where you see the blue, but it also has to extend just beyond the stitching line to cover this entire area. So you don't have to be too particular about your cutting, but let me just take the selvage out of this, but you do need to make it big enough. That's just some garbage. Okay, so the piece I need has to fit in this area here, stopping at this line. So if I just trim a piece off here, off my blue, that is going to be plenty big enough to cover that area. Now, the thing about paper piecing is you have to place the paper on the back of the pattern. So now if we had a right and wrong side to the fabric we're using, the right side would face the tabletop, wrong side would face the wrong side of the paper. Okay, so now what we're going to do is just fasten this piece here, and it extends beyond this line and beyond the dotted stitching lines, and we're going to just make sure that that stays in place. So I will take a pin and just place that there to hold my blue fabric in place on the back of the foundation paper pattern. Now, That's piece number 1. And if you get these first 2 pieces correct, it's a breeze from there. So we want, if they're right side, the right side would be facing out, wrong sides of the paper and the fabric would be together. But we want to add our next piece, which is piece A2, which is right here, and that's the bow. So I have pinned this blue in place, but it's a little bit raggedy in this area, and we need to trim that before we move on to our next piece that we're going to add in. So what we want to do is fold on the line between A1 and A2, and the line between A1 and A2 is right here. So I'm going to fold it. I fold it away from myself first. I can always fold it back towards myself. Okay, so this area here is going to be our seam allowance. So normally we want a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And there's a very handy tool that you can get called an add a 1/4 ruler, which is just the greatest thing for foundation piecing. And you're going to want to get one of these. They come in 6-inch long and 12-inch long. Now the thing about this ruler is it has a ridge here, and that ridge catches here on the fold of the paper. So what you want to do to establish that 1/4 inch seam is just ride the ridge on the edge of the paper and trim it on that edge to give yourself a nice 1/4 inch seam. And now we want to move on to the buff color and get ourselves a piece that will kind of fit in this area here. So if we make it the same size, a little bit bigger than this, we'll be fine. I always like to be generous with my cutting because you can run into problems if you don't. So I don't mind making things a little bit bigger. Now, this is where things get sometimes get confusing for people. So you've got the right side showing here, but the work is actually going to be on the wrong side of the paper. So what we want to do is turn it over, and we would be putting right sides together. With this cotton, it doesn't really matter, but if you had a pattern, you would want right sides together. You're going to place these edges evenly, okay? And then it doesn't hurt to pin that too, just so it doesn't move around. And then you turn it and you stitch from this side that has the printing, and you're going to stitch straight across here on that line and extending beyond the dotted line. So I'll just go do that and I'll stitch across there. So here I am with my piece of paper, and I'm just going to start off the paper here. So I'm not starting on the dotted line, but I'm starting away from it. And I want to set my stitch length to a small stitch, so 2 millimeters. And I'm going to stitch straight across the line that joins A1 and A2. Go right across and cut the thread. Okay, so now what happens, take these pins out, is when we turn it to what is the right side eventually, we can peel this back and we have the start of our little block here. And we're going to move on and add the A3 portion to it as well. Okay, so here we are again with our first piece. And I want to just fold this back and press it. Nice distinct line. And I need to just trim a little bit of this off on the outside edge if we have too much. And then what I want to do is make a fold here between A2 and A3. And you can just fold that along the line and fold it back again, or you can use something to keep that line nice and straight. I've got like a Dritz Easy Hem here. It's got a nice edge to it. Okay, so I have folded that back, and what I want to do now is trim off this excess buff colored fabric leaving me a 1/4 inch seam. And again, to do that, we fold that back and use our add 1/4 ruler with the ridge. The ridge just slides along that fold that we made. And we can trim that off so that now I have a nice 1/4 inch seam beyond that fold that I made. Okay, so I'm going to fold the paper back there, and I need a little bit of blue to fit in this section here. Okay, so I'll go to my blue fabric, and I don't need very much, but I need enough. So I'm going to just cut a square, and using one of those straight edges that I cut, I'm going to turn over my piece, and with right sides together I will place that blue square there. Now what I like to do is just pin it about a 1/4 inch in, and then I just like to test it and make sure it's going to fit in the space that it's supposed to fit in. So when I turn that, there's plenty of room around it to cover to the seam line. Okay, so I know if I sew along this next line between A1 and A3, I will have enough fabric. So I'm going to stitch right along there next. Okay, I put a little pin there to hold my little extra square of fabric in place. And I want to stitch along this A line between A2 and A3, just right across. So I drew that in so you could see that a little bit easier. But I think I have to move my pin, it's kind of in the way. I am going to start off of the edge of the paper. And there, my thread. And when I turn this back on itself, it's completely covered, that little area in there where A3 is. Okay, so there's our little piece we just added in. I'm going to press it. There. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this whole piece along the dotted line on the outside. So I'll just move my iron here. And I will use my add 1/4 ruler because it's handy, and trim just on the dotted line, just to tidy things up. You want to be sure that your longer piece doesn't move around and wiggle out of place. Okay, so we have some scrap here. There's always lots of scrap with foundation piecing. Okay, so there's the front. Oops, I keep losing you there. There's the front. But here's the finished side, okay? And that is going to fit in this space here eventually. You can see that, so we'll go in here. So that's our piece A, and we're going to move on to our section B now, okay? The H. The H is a little bit easier to create because it's getting a little bit bigger. But first we start with the number 1 piece, which is this little square in the middle. And our H is made with some olive green fabric. So we're going to get a little piece that's bigger so that we have seam allowance, and maybe a little extra even. And then we're going to add piece 2, piece 3, piece 4, and piece 5 to it. So we're kind of building out from the middle. And just a little square for the center. Okay, and that is going to go directly behind that little section 1 in the middle, and I can see through the paper that that it's centered, so I will just pin that And then we want to fold because we always want to trim before we add the next piece. So piece 2 is here. And I will just fold over my easy hammer here. There. Okay. And then I need to use my add 1/4 ruler. It might be nice to use actually a flat flower head pin here because my round-headed pin is getting a little bit in the way. So I'm going to trim that off. And I have 1/4 inch extending beyond the line between 1 and 2. So now we've got piece 1 in place, and it is right side out, wrong sides together here. So the wrong side of the fabric, the wrong side of the paper. And we need to add a piece of this buff colored fabric to this now. Again, we want to make sure that our piece is going to be big enough. This is about 1/2 inch wide, and then you still need another 1/2 inch for your seam allowance, so that's 1 inch. So you want to cut it, I don't know, maybe 1.5 inches, just to be sure. Okay. Now I've got a straight edge here, and I'm just going to put these 2 straight edges together. Okay. And just make my pin. And then I need to stitch the line between B1 and B2. Now, this is a little bit different. We're not going to stitch off the page. We have to stay within this line. So we're going to start here and do a little back stitch and end here and do a little back stitch. Stitch forward, stitch back, move across, stop at that other line, stitch backwards, and cut your thread. You can see that I haven't gone into that B4 or B5 area. We're going to press this. So, all right, and turn it over. Now, we've got B1 in place, we've got B2 in place, now we're going to add B3. So again, we're going to cut a little piece of fabric. And before we add the fabric, we have to do that folding again. So I just put my easy hammer on the line between B1 and B3 and fold it back. And that's that little piece we have to trim on the B1 piece. So we put our add 1/4 ruler along the fold and we trim off that excess there. Okay, and then we're going to take our buff colored fabric and we place it right sides together. And now I'm going to fold the paper back, and I picked up a flat-headed pin here so we don't have as much trouble. And I'm going to pin that in place, and then I am going to stitch on this side from here to join this B3 piece in place. Alrighty, so I want to do exactly the same as what we just did, but on the other side. Okay, and again I want to press that, and there we have that whole center section done, and now we're going to add B4 on this side. But before we add that, we have to fold it on the line. So there's our line between what we just sewed, and we'll fold that up there. And then, if you'll recall, after we fold, we trim. So I put my add 1/4 ruler on the fold and take off the excess. All right, so now we need to add a piece of green. And that again is like about a 1.5 to 2 inch piece. I want to have it a little bit longer than the actual dotted line. So I'm just gonna snip a piece off here. There's some for the other side. Okay, now we want to put right sides together laying that trimmed edge, trimmed edge on that nice straight line we just did, but we want to make sure that we have some seam allowance on either side. And I think we're in good shape. So now I will fold that down and pin it in place. And then we need to stitch along that fold line. So we're going to stitch along the line here. All right, so we have a bit of longer spot to stitch along, and we want to go from beyond the dotted line to beyond the dotted line here. So from here all the way over here. And we're stitching on that solid line. I don't backstitch when I'm off the dotted line. I just kind of stitch into it. And stitching on top of the line, we go all the way across. Okay, so I press that, and there. And you want to make sure these, the pressing is really well done. You don't want a kind of a fold over area there, otherwise your pieces don't fit together very well later on. So there's the beginning of our H. And now we want to add on the green on the opposite side. Alrighty, time to press again. Okay, so there is our right side, but we need to trim that off along the dotted line edge. And when this is all trimmed, it looks quite decent. So there we are, our H, and it's all trimmed and looking quite nice, and it will eventually be stitched together to this first piece we made. This is A, this is B, and we'll go on to C and so on. So I think you can get through C on your own. It's very similar, it's the O, but I will stop and take some time with you to do the M because it's a little bit different. So our M is done in a couple of sections, one here and one here, and they fit together. So there is the first one we'll be working on, and then we'll be doing the second piece. So we've got some triangles here, which is a little bit different. We need a blue and a red. So D1 is blue, and it is a triangle, and that is not big enough. So I'm going to cut from the opposite end, get rid of that fold line, and I will just cut a piece pretty much the size of the whole piece and pop it on here, get a pin, hold it. Okay, we want to add D2 next, which is the triangle which lives over there, and of course we have to fold on the fold line. Then take our add a quarter ruler and trim just off the fold line. And then we have to add a piece of red that will fit in there. Now this is a little bit, you'd think you don't need as much as you do, but you need a fair piece because the piece that goes underneath here has to fold over and cover all of that. So I'm going to cut a piece that seems big, but it's probably not. And then I have to do one on the other side, so I might as well just chop another one off while I'm at it. And then we are going to put this centered. And you can always kind of do a trial here to see if it's going to actually cover when you fold it over at the back by pinning along the stitching line and peeling back your piece and saying, okay, I'm good, it covers the whole piece. All right? So that's just a nice little technique to do a little double check. So I'm going to sew all the way across. So from here all the way across over to the other side. Okay, so we have a triangle here now, and we want to stitch all the way from here all the way across. So I will start off the dotted line. And go all the way across. All right, so I pressed that, and now we want to fold along this D3 shape. But you can see we have some stitching here that's going to get in the way of our folding. So we have to kind of tear it back to the fold line. Okay? And I will fold it back now. Take that other piece of wrap that we made earlier. I'm pinning it along the stitching line, and then I'm going to pull it back and just have a little look-see, and that is going to cover everything. So I have stitched all the way across, and you can see that that's going to work out. So back to the iron. All right, so now I want to trim along my dotted line. There's the top, there's the lower bit. So it's just a bit of a process to get everything stitched together, but it's a lovely result when you're all done. There. So there is the bottom of our M. Here is the top of our M, and we're going to just flip and match up the stitching lines and stitch across to join that. So you see how the edges are even? This is very important. Otherwise, you know, the O won't fit to the M and so on and so forth. So it's important to be accurate. And it shouldn't be hard with the paper piecing. I will just give it a back stitch there. You kind of have to hang on to it because sometimes the paper wants to kind of move around a little bit at the end of the stitching. Okay. There we are. Isn't that nice? And I'm going to press that seam open. Alrighty. And I can also remove the paper at this time, just at the seam line. No place else, okay? Just at the seam line. Carefully press that open. Give a little shot from the front too. All right, so we have got, it's our roof line, H, O, M, and so on. All right, so I will finish off stitching E and this section, and then we'll do the roof section together. So now we've got all of our main pieces made, plus our little chimney, and we are now going to make the top of the houses, the roof line, and we'll do that one together. We're going to start off with piece 1, blue, and we want to make sure that that's going to be large enough so I can see that I need a little bit more than the width. So I'll just cut across here and place my paper on top with a pin. There we go, lots of extra there. And we still have enough for our side piece here. All right, and then we want to go to piece number 2. So we have to fold it. And then we trim it. Just gonna move my pin, it's a bit lumpy. There we go. Okay. Now the trick is making sure that we have enough to cover our triangle here. And the best way to do that is just to pin it in place and do a trial. The triangles are always a little bit trickier to get right. So I've lined up the edges here. I'm going to just take a pin and put a pin on the stitching line. Actually, that's where it should be, not there. And then we're going to fold it this way to see just how much fabric we actually need. So I'm going to cut my fabric here, and I don't need all this. Let's take that off. And now I know when I stitch that line, there'll be enough to cover into the corner. So I'll go ahead and do that. So start off the edge, straight across, and press. Oops. Okay, now we have to fold along the line between piece 1 and piece 3. And then trim. Get our image seam allowance. And then I take our piece of white fabric. And do a little trial run with that by pinning on the stitching line and then just pulling it back. And then cutting a piece of fabric that will cover. Alright, so I'll go sew that up. Okay, so now we're on to piece 4. And we have that stitching line here that we have to rip back. There. There. And I need to trim that. So now we have to add a piece of blue into this. Just have one little piece left. Okay, line that up. And put a pin on the stitching line and turn back that blue fabric just to make sure that we have enough. And we do, there's lots there, so I'll stitch on that line. This is quite an awkward looking piece, but we'll soon have it all tidied up. We have our final piece. And now it is time to take all these bits and stitch them together. So, we will start by joining these two pieces. We have an H, and we have the blue strip with a little triangle at the top. And pin these in a few spots on either end. They have to match. And perhaps one in the middle as well. Okay. And then I'm going to stitch along this joining line here. Okay, Okay, so there we have all our bits together for the lower portion of the block, and now it is time to put our roof line on. We have to be a little bit careful about our matching points. So, start at the corner, the square corner, and I'll put a pin through the roof line here at the point where the lines intersect. And I kind of have a little peak here. I want to put the pin right in that area there. And if we do that, everything will line up. Okay, so there's one pin. And same thing here, we've got another intersection line and another intersection line, so I'm going to put a pin through where the cross line is, and then I've got to find the top of the M point, and I will pin that together. And this intersecting line here, other top edge of the M point. And then our odd little corner should just nudge right into place without too much trouble. Do a little back stitching here. Okay, so if we head over to the intersecting point, which is just under here, right there. So very carefully, and I'm going to take the pin out and carry on. And my paper is ripped a little, so I'll just have to aim for the where the pin is in the fabric. And cross. And again. So slowly. Oops. There we go. Okay. The moment of truth. Pretty good. Great. Okay, so we're gonna peel the paper out from the seam line and press, and then add our final corner. All right, so now we just want to pop our chimney on top and off to the sewing machine. So there's our finished block, and next we're going to incorporate it into this really cute pillow. We're going to start by cutting a little base piece that goes on the bottom of the home block, and that measures 1.5 by 9.5, and we're going to stitch that to the bottom of the block. From there, we need to cut pieces for the top and bottom of the block to build up the size of the pillow. And those top and bottom borders are cut 4 by 9.5, and you cut 2 of those. Once that's on and we've pressed it all, we add the side pieces, and the side borders you'll cut 2 at 3 by 14.5. And I'm just going to go to the sewing machine and stitch it all together. Okay, the deed is done. So we'll just press. Oh. So there is our top. Now, of course, we have all this paper to remove now. We've left it in here to keep the shape of things, but it all has to come out at this point. So I'm going to take a few minutes and do that. Once you've completed that task, you just might want to go over your project and snip off any threads, especially if you're using dark thread like I did, and it might land behind some of these lighter bits of fabric, so you don't want that to show through from the front. So I've just done that, and then I'm going to give everything a press. So that's going to form the front of our pillow, but I mean it's pretty sloppy stuff at this point, and we want to give it some body. So what you do is you cut a 14.5-inch square of fusible fleece. And fusible fleece, the bumpy side is the fusible side, and then you've got the side without the glue on it. So we will turn over our block and fit this into the corners. Oops, that's my pin. And then I will turn it to the right side once I've got everything pinned in place and fuse it by using my hottest temperature on the iron and plenty of steam, giving it lots of steam and heat so that that fleece fuses in place. And that's going to give our pillow more of a cushioned look, and honestly it just looks more professional, so you don't want to skip this part. It's kind of important. There we go. So that is much nicer, right? It doesn't have that sloppy feel, that homemade feel that we don't want. We want this to look really professional. So now I'm just going to go around the piece and trim off the excess fusible fleece that you see here at the edges. Next, I want to add a little interest to my pillow top by using some decorative thread to echo stitch all the way around it. And I made like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows of echo stitching 1/4 inch apart. And I've used this sulky 12 weight thread to do this with, because that's really going to show up nicely. Regular thread just isn't going to cut the mustard here. So get yourself a spool of 12 weight thread, and I'm going to stitch through all the layers, of course, here, starting at a corner and just working my way around the larger block, including the base here, and around 5 times 1/4 inch away, and fastening the threads at the beginning and the end. So I have my 12 weight thread in the top thread, of course, and then I have just my regular dark blue in the bottom, and the needle, the only thing I'm concerned about is the eye is big enough for the 12 weight thread, and I believe I've got an 80-12 in here. But I also want to change my length of my stitch to 3. I'm going to start my stitching right in one of these creases of the seam, and I will just stitch in place and then start and work my way around the entire piece, and then I will just show you what I do at the corner just to carry on. This is a 1/4 inch foot, so the edge of the foot just moves along your seam line to keep you nice and straight. Oops, I got my tail end there. I'm just going to move that out. When you get to the corner of a block, you just proceed until you see the guide mark on the back of the foot there, and I think that will be about right when I turn. So there's my pivot, and I can carry on from there. Now I'm at my beginning point, and I just want my guide mark to be right there at the stitching line. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a little groove in my foot. So now I know when I turn, I've got that 1/4 inch. And so I'm going to work my way around until I have 5 lines of stitching on this project. So I've done my 5 rows, but I'm coming back to my starting point. So I'm just going to go level to that last line. Another stitch, I think, or 2. Okay, and then I'm going to pivot, and I'm just going to join at that last spot. And I'll just take a few stitches in place, maybe one backwards, one forwards, and cut the thread. There we go. And that looks pretty nice. So we have our top done with the top stitching and the fusible fleece on the back. And we also want to do something along the same lines on the back side of our pillow. Now, to make the back of your pillow, you're going to need to cut 2 pieces of fabric that measure 14.5 by 21. And you're going to need to cut 2 pieces of fusible fleece that measure 14.5 by 10.5. And what is going to happen is you will place your fusible fleece on half of this larger piece of fabric, pin it in place, and then press to adhere it. So now I'm just folding the 2 together to sandwich the fleece between and make it nice and even, and press on that fold. So if my edges don't happen to be even because I have a little bit of fleece poking up here, I will trim that off before I do a scant 1/4 inch baste around the raw edges of the 2 back pieces. One other thing I'd like to mention, when you do your basting, you want to put the side with the fabric only face down under your sewing machine when you baste, and that way you won't get any puckers. So I have my 2 side or back pieces finished. I've done 5 rows of top stitching on one side and just 1 row on the opposite side. All right, so we take our pillow front, place it wrong side up, and we take one side of our back and situate it on top here and pin the edges. So there's the one side with the 1 line of top stitching, and we want to place this other side, overlapping it, and we're going to pin that in place as well. And then I'll take it back to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch all the way around. And when you get to the overlap section, it doesn't hurt just to go over that one more time, because when you put the pillow in, that receives quite a bit of stress. So around once and then just reinforce in the overlapped area. Okay, so we've sewn all the way around there, and we've reinforced the area where there'll be the most strain when the pillow form is put in place. And what we are going to do now is take our binding. We're going to find the center point of the bottom of the project just by folding it. And then we're going to take half the width of the binding and just fold that back. So there's 1, and there's about 1/8 there. And I'm just going to fold that back and just hold it with a pin. All right, so we're going to place our binding on the front of the project. And I'm just going to do just a little bit of pinning here. I'm going to take it over to the first corner. And what we're going to do here is lay it even, of course, with the edge, and then we're going to pull it away from us, move all this over, so that, and we're folding it into the corner at a 45-degree angle, so into the corner of the pillow at a 45-degree angle, and then it's even, the long edge of the binding is even with the next side of the pillow, okay? And you're gonna fold that back on itself. Just like so. It's kind of like making a bed. So we've got it folded at a 45-degree angle here, and then, let me just go through it again. So you bring it over, even, you pull it away from yourself so that this long edge is even, okay? Then you fold it back so that the short edge is even with that first side you just worked on. And then put a pin there. And then we're going to take it to our sewing machine, and we're going to start sewing right here, not over here, over here. And I'm going to put a walking foot on the machine so that the various layers don't move at different rates, and that'll help us get our binding on very nicely. So we have our 2 1/8 inch turned under at the center of the bottom of the bag, and we have our first corner ready to go. And I have my walking foot on. So I want to start not where the binding starts, but a little closer to the corner. To just take a few stitches here, 1/4 inch away. I have a 1/4 inch guide here on the walking foot right there. So take a stitch or two, a couple back. Okay, and then I'm going to have to just turn the camera around so that I can do this. So I'm here at the corner of the pillow binding, and I need to move this little extra piece of fabric that has been created by this 45-degree fold, flipping it over this way. So I'm going to put my needle down boy, and I'm going to just turn this towards me, and as you're stitching here, you're going to feel that there is a ridge here from where the fold is. So I'm going to put my, put my foot down and my needle down and just stitch up to that ridge now. I think I just need a different color marker here so you can see that. Let's try green. Yeah, it's right in there. All right, so I'm going to stitch up to that ridge, and you'll be able to, like I said, feel that with your finger. You don't want to go right on top of it, just maybe a stitch away. Okay, so I'm there now, and at this point you need to raise your foot and raise your needle, pull it out a little, and just tip it back to where it came from, okay? And then you turn your work, go to the edge of the corner, and off you go again. And that's all there is to it, to getting around a corner. And then when you're, I'm 3 or 4 inches away, I will fold back my binding fabric on a 45-degree angle, and I will flip it over so that all edges are even. Fold back my little ridged area there and stitch right up to it. Stopping just before that ridge. Lift my foot, lift my needle, turn my work, flip that back, and off we go again to our next corner. So you'll go around all 4 corners, and you're going to stop just right after you get through with your 4th corner. And then you're going to take the project out of the machine so that we can join the ends together. Okay, so I have stitched all the way around and stopped at my last corner, and I have my tail end here, and I want to trim it even with the finished edge, or the short edge of the beginning area there. So I'm just gonna snip a little bit off there, keep it square. Okay, so now these two raw edges line up right here. Okay. And then I hold the piece like I am sitting on it, and I open up the tail end and the beginning end, and I place them right sides together. And what I want to do is draw a line from corner to corner, just like when we joined the binding. So I'm just going to make marks on the top piece because it's easier to draw that line when they're not nudged together there. And draw my line. And we'll put them back together again. So, right sides together. Pin that. And then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to stitch along my marked line and trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch and press it over. So once you have trimmed and ironed your last little bit of binding, you're going to pin it in between and stitch that to finish. And from there it's a matter of pulling your folded edge over to the back and hand stitching it in place to finish your pillow. So I hope you've enjoyed making the home pillow with me and have learned some interesting techniques like how to do foundation paper piecing, how to join the pieces together, how to match your points, the importance of adding some fusible fleece to the back of your pillow project to give a nice lush feel, just like the decorator pillows, and how to make a really interesting and colorful binding that will pull your colors out to the outside of the project and really make it look like a lovely designer piece. So I hope someday, if you have not yet joined us at the ABQ Sewing Studio, that you will. And thanks so much for joining me. I'm Brenda Miller saying bye.